So I think it all starts with intention. There's a lot of anthropologists who argue that the reason that humans were able to leave Africa and cover the planet is that they have this amazing ability to think about the future, a new desired state, and create an intention to go achieve that state. And that allowed us to literally span the globe and put us in the predicament that we find ourselves today. But it had to begin with an intention. And my life also began with what I would argue is a bold intention, not necessarily a creative one. This is me at the age of 4. And it's not a very creative intention because like about half of all kids decide they're going to be a dinosaur paleontologist. I just happened to like not give it up. And this intention has informed my life, really. There was a brief time in my life when I could reliably spell the word paleontologist and not my last name. So this was something that was deeply meaningful to me. Now, a lot of people see this picture and they think, wow, there must have been a straight line from 4-year-old to PhD. And there wasn't. You know, like probably all of you, there were zigzags involved, and I thought about doing various things. I didn't rediscover fossils until I was an undergraduate. I didn't rediscover dinosaur fossils until I was a PhD student. But I was very happy that it led me back to this childhood passion. And shortly after I finished my PhD, I found myself involved with a project that was working in Madagascar. And I was a pretty young paleontologist at the time, and I was pumped to be going to this place where no one had really ever done paleontological research. And it was cool because there were hundreds of these teeth known. And dinosaurs are like sharks. They constantly replace their teeth. We're mammals, so we only get 2 sets, which is kind of a drag because we actually have to take care of them. Dinosaurs drop them, and if you look at this tooth, you can see it's only the crown. There's no root on it. The root would make this tooth more than twice as long. But the root gets resorbed, and the tooth drops out. So in many places where you find fossils, you find lots of teeth. But in this case, people had found hundreds of teeth over a century, maybe thousands, but had never found the animal. So we set an intention. In 1996, we went back to Madagascar. We went to this place, Badlands, little pocket of Badlands in northwest Madagascar near a place called Majunga. And each one of these little white things you can see is sand. And I could take you there, and you could walk up to any one of these white spots, and you would find fossils. It's one of the only places in the world that's anything like the first scene in Jurassic Park, where the helicopter's coming down and these guys are brushing and the skeleton reveals itself. Like, that never, ever, 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 ever happens, but it comes close in Madagascar. And in 1996, we went looking for the head of this animal, and I happened to be the lucky person. I found some tail bones that I knew belonged to a big carnivorous dinosaur, and people say, well, how do you know? Well, that's why you go to school for so long. And I literally chased the tail into the hill, and then I found a leg bone, and I thought, this is it, we got the whole thing, and I uncovered the leg bone, and I went, oh, crap, it was a leg bone of a giant brontosaur, sauropod-type dinosaur, and I thought, it's just a mix of animals. We're never going to find the head. But I kept digging, and a half hour later, I took my little hammer and awl, and I lifted up a piece of rock, and underneath it was a jaw with teeth gleaming at me, literally. So I'm the first person in 68 million years to see this. In fact, it's the first time in 68 million years this thing's seen the light of day, and the teeth are literally shining. Looking up. So, I think there were a few expletives said at that moment. It's just a good thing the cameras weren't running. But we then uncovered all around it, and the entire skull was present. Everything, with like 1 or 2 minor things missing. We took them back to the United States. We made copies of them, and they literally clicked back together like a kid's kit. And I brought today a copy of this thing that I keep in my office. We call this animal Majungasaurus. It has this weird bump on the top of its head. The whole animal is about 25 to 30 feet long, and it's bizarre because it has stubby legs, so it's only about that tall. It could still run you down in a heartbeat, but it was a weird-looking animal in some respects, and the discovery of this animal led us down paths that we never, ever thought we would go down. It turned out that the closest relatives to this beast were in India and Argentina. And that led us to start creating hypotheses about how these animals got there. And eventually, we found not just Majungasaurus, and we've got now a number of skeletons. We have, and I'm sorry if you can't see this well, I don't know if we can bring the lights down at all to bring it out better, but we found a whole suite, a whole assemblage of animals, and every single thing we found was new to science. And that is true in most places we go looking for these dinosaurs. So this is Majungasaurus right here. This is one of those long-necked sauropods, or for all you old people, Brontosaurus, right there. This is a buck-toothed raptor-like dinosaur that we named after Mark Knopfler, the lead singer of Dire Straits. I won't tell the story. If you want to ask me about it later, you can. This is, you can't see it very well at all, but it's a pug-nosed vegetarian crocodile, just to make things weird, not your typical crocodile. And this is the biggest frog ever found. A frog big enough that it may have eaten baby dinosaurs. We called it Beelzebufo, the frog from hell. So that's where it came from. So we had to reconstruct these worlds, and this is why I became a paleontologist. Science is highly creative. You have to work with artists. All you have is bones and teeth, right? And you have to reconstruct these ecosystems from all kinds of clues. This is what we do, and this is so exciting. I just look at this picture and I light up thinking about all of the amazing discoveries that went into making it. A few years later, I found myself closer to home in North America. A daughter came into my life, and I decided I didn't want to live in a tent in Africa or Madagascar for multiple months every summer. So I started I started a project in southern Utah, got a wonderful job at the University of Utah working at a museum and as a faculty member in the geology department. And they took me down to this place, and we drove around in trucks, and it's a place that has been in the news as of late. It's called Grand Staircase-Escalante National Monument. It's a place that is one of the monuments that Donald Trump has sliced and cut into smaller pieces, and there is some concern that, in fact, we know that some of the areas that have now been taken out of the monument have a rich fossil history in them. And just as in Madagascar, over the past 20 years, we've uncovered a whole assemblage of animals from about 75 million years ago. But in this place, it was the last area in the lower 48 states to be mapped because it's so rugged. It's 2 million acres. It makes up the big chunk of southern Utah, surrounded by national parks that everybody goes to. Nobody goes here because there's only like 4 roads through the 2 million acres. So we do a lot of walking up and down these hills, and it is a very rugged place. We have to use helicopters a lot to get the work done that we do. But we find amazing things. This is the skeleton. It's the backbone of a duck-billed dinosaur. And most of the skeleton was there in this hill at the top of the hill. This is a 30-foot-long animal. It's heavier than an elephant. And it was virtually complete. And alongside was this weird pebbly stuff that turned out to be skin impressions. And they covered the body. And this isn't the only one. It turns out that in this place in southern Utah, most of the skeletons we find in sandstone, which is stone that comes from a river. Basically, this is an animal that fell into a river and was buried. Preserve these skin impressions. So they're amazing. And they give us another clue into what these animals actually look like in life. So again, we've had an opportunity to reconstruct the whole ecosystem. We have climatologists working with us, dinosaur paleontologists, reptile people, lizard people. I mean, that sounds a little weird, I'm sorry. There's folks who just do plants, fossil plants. We now have thousands and thousands of plant fossils. And what we have found, and once again, we weren't expecting to do this, but what we found is this area, now think about where Utah is at a mid-latitude, this area may have been more diverse 75 million years ago than equatorial regions. Why? Because this is a world that has gone through huge global warming. It's a greenhouse world where there are no polar ice caps. And we talk a lot today about global warming, and what many people don't realize is that the state of the world in which sea levels are high and there's no polar ice caps, that's the norm in Earth history. In the 4.5 billion years of Earth history, most of the time there have been no polar ice caps. And so if you want to understand how the Earth reacts in a period of global warming, a period that we are heading into very, very quickly, you cannot go anywhere on Earth today and find the answers, because we are still in an ice age. So if you're going to find those answers, you got to go back and explore ancient worlds, like the late Cretaceous, 75 million years ago. And if you want to go and explore that world, it turns out that southern Utah is one of the best places anywhere to go and understand it. And it turns out southern Utah was a swamp back then, and there were all kinds of amazing creatures living there. It turns out, and we're just starting to explore this. This is cutting-edge science. The papers are actually underway. It looks like ecology and evolution operate differently in a greenhouse world than they do in an icehouse world like we're in right now. And if you're interested, I can talk about that later. But all these animals were new to science as well. And I've had the pleasure now of being involved in naming 15 different dinosaurs. And that might sound amazing, but that's not that unusual for a paleontologist. The rate of discovery of dinosaurs has just spiked because of all the people around the world looking. There have been more discovered in the past generation than in all prior history, and that rate of discovery is not slowing down. And one of the things I always tell kids is, if you are really excited about dinosaurs or any area of science, there are still fundamental discoveries to be made. Don't believe the textbooks that seem to indicate, like, we've got it all figured out. We don't. We're still making really key insights on a regular basis, and southern Utah is just one of them. So one of the lessons I learned about creativity and intention is the power of serendipity. You have to immerse yourself in whatever it is you're being creative about. And once you're immersed, once you're fully embedded in that, you have to open yourself up to creativity. When I'm walking around the Badlands looking for a fossil, I've noticed that my mental mindset may determine whether or not I find anything that day. Because you never know. Like, it's not Indiana Jones. Like, it's not big adventures and snakes and stuff. Like, you're living in hot weather with people you might not even like for months at a time, eating rice and beans every day. Like, but you never know when you're going to go around a corner and find something that is the equivalent of a prehistoric Picasso, something that no one has ever seen that could change the way we think about the world. And that's exciting. And that's what happens all the time. And you get these connections around global warming or continents breaking up, things you weren't even expecting, and it's the power of basic science. And I brought up Percy Spencer just to give you one example. There are thousands of examples. Percy Spencer worked for a company called Raytheon. And in 1946, he was investigating radar in wartime. And while he was doing that, he was looking at radar and looking, in particular, studying microwaves. And he was working in the lab one day, and he had a chocolate bar in his pocket. And he turned on the microwaves, and the chocolate bar started to melt. And he thought, well, that's weird. The microwaves are kicking out heat. Well, other people had made this observation, but Percy got on the ball, and he said, hey, maybe we could make like a microwave oven. Wouldn't that be cool? And he did. They invented Raytheon. His company was the first one to do this. So he wasn't looking to invent a microwave oven. So there was a study that came out on Canadian attitudes about science a year ago, put out by the Ontario Science Centre. They surveyed people across the country. And one of the things that people said, 59% of Canadians said, we should really just fund, the government should only fund applied science, science that is all about commercial opportunities or innovation. And the problem with that is that you wouldn't get discoveries like this. or you wouldn't get people thinking about dinosaurs and global warming. You need this kind of basic science for the discoveries, and it's the discoveries that lead to the innovations, many of which are unexpected, and it's the innovations that lead to the commercial applications. So that basic science is key. In that same survey, 43% of Canadians said science is a matter of opinion. 43%. So, just in case you're not sure, science is not a matter of opinion. It's kind of like the evil opposite of that, maybe. So the whole point of science is that you've got multiple people testing the same thing and seeing if they get the same results. And you have to publish your results in a way that other people can go and test. And only after it's tested again and again does something become like an emergent truth within science. So there is no opinion involved. I mean, that's not true. There's an art to science, and I would say one of the insights that I've had along the way is the whole notion of art and science are completely false dichotomies that both involve deep creativity, both involve this power of intention, both involve critical thinking. So what Percy did was artistic as well as scientific. So I'm changing gears as to another phase in my life. I had literally the dream job. I was in Utah and everyone thought, oh my God, you've got graduate students, you work at a museum, you've got dinosaur fossils a few hours away that are shifting the way we look at the world. You're like set for life. And my wife and I decided to leave it and move to California. My colleagues thought I was insane. They said, what are you doing? That's nuts. You're leaving your tenured job to go to no job? And I did that because I got to the point in my life where I felt like the pressing things in the world were not going to get solved by me studying animals that had been dead for 75 million years. That there was a crisis around education, around science in particular, and around things like getting kids outside and that. And so went to California, and it was another one of these creativity and intention. I set the intention to go do this without really knowing where the hell I was going to end up. And sure enough, not long after I got to California, I got a phone call from the Jim Henson Company. That's not a phone call you get every day, right? And so it was a woman who was the vice president of the Jim Henson Company, and she said, Dr. Sampson, and that was back when people actually called me Dr. Sampson. Now I'm just Dr. Scott. But she said, Dr. Sampson, we're going to do this show for PBS Kids on dinosaurs. Do you think you might like to get involved? And I said, well, that sounds really interesting. What's it called? And she said, we're going to call it Dinosaur Train. And I said, you can't call it that. And she said, how come? And I said, listen, I'm a paleontologist. I'm always trying to convince people that humans and dinosaurs didn't live at the same time. You can't go sticking them on trains like the Flintstones or something. And she said, no, don't worry. We're only going to put dinosaurs on the train. And like, that is just bloody brilliant, right? That's chocolate and peanut butter for 5-year-olds, dinosaurs and trains. And it is this amazing thing. I said, okay, I'm in. This is great. And so we started doing this show, and it's been phenomenal. It now airs daily in over 100 countries around the world. And I have had so much fun being Dr. Scott, the paleontologist. And how many people have actually seen the show? Put your hands up. And I'm not offended at all. It's intended for humans this tall. So I'm just curious. And so it's been this amazing adventure in my life that has taken me down pathways that I never could have anticipated. So once again, creativity, serendipity, all informed by intention. And then I got to the point where I said, okay, we really do have a crisis right now in our hands. And many people don't realize the magnitude of it, or at least the nature of it in some ways. And a lot of it has to do with this generation of kids growing up right now. We are performing an experiment on this generation that has never been performed before. We have had a massive indoor migration in the past generation. Most children live effectively under house arrest, not allowed to really go outside. We've had skyrocketing rates of obesity, attention deficit disorder, diabetes, depression, even conditions like myopia, to the point where one US Surgeon General said a few years ago, this generation of kids may be the first to have a life expectancy shorter than that of their parents. In addition to that, we have a crisis not just in the health of children, but in the health of the places that they live. We all know about the ecological crisis. And so it occurred to me that if people don't go outside and they don't care about where they live, why are they ever going to care about ecological sustainability? So that's led to me doing a lot of work and thinking around trying to get kids outside and connected back with nature again. But it also speaks to education, and you all know this. We all talk about education reform, and what we need is not education reform. We need education transformation. We need to get away from this old industrial model that's all about conveying content and then getting kids to regurgitate it back. And I do not blame teachers at all. In fact, I applaud teachers. If I were made king tomorrow, I would double the salaries of teachers and make it a high-profile profession. But teachers are compelled to teach to a test. They aren't able to relate a lot of what they do in the classroom to anything the kids experience outside. They're not trained to do it. They're not given the bandwidth to do it. And we need to turn this around. We need a different kind of education system altogether. So a few years ago, I was working at a natural history museum in Colorado after I left California, and I was recruited to apply for the position of CEO of Science World. And I thought, wow, what an amazing thing to come back to my hometown. So here's an amazing stat. George Land, he was actually hired by NASA to document creativity so they could pick out people who were really creative. Turns out only like 2% of all people rated that. So George Land took the same study and he applied it to 1,500 kids. At age 5, 98% of those kids rated to be creative geniuses. He then tested those same 1,500 kids at age 10. Only 30% rated as creative geniuses. At age 15, only 12%, and then until they got to be adults. So creativity isn't learned, it's unlearned. And we need to find ways to help this blue line go all the way across. So that's what we're doing at Science World. And I just want to wrap up by giving you the briefest overview of a major initiative that we're undertaking for British Columbia. We are doing a co-collaborative, or a deeply collaborative, learning ecosystem called Symbiosis. And the idea here is to leverage the assets of government, of K through 12, of higher education, of business, to create opportunities. We all know that kids are learning all the time, not just in classrooms anymore. What if we merge the community with the classroom and give kids access to mentors in a whole variety of fields? The goal is to turn on the lights so kids can see all the opportunities around them, help them find the pathway they're most passionate about and have aptitude for, and then give them the mentorship to climb that pathway. And that's what we're doing with Symbiosis. And it's really just 3 key elements. We're training mentors, we're collaborating them in communities, and we're creating a digital hub, something to tie it all together. And those mentors are not just school teachers. They are engineers, they're scientists, they're technologists, they're entrepreneurs. Anyone who works in this area, we call it STEM, science, tech, engineering, and math, but we also include the letter A for art and design because that's how youth relate to science, is through art and design. And we will create a digital hub, and the vision is that within 5 years, every kid in BC will get access to this engaging, personalized STEM learning suite of opportunities. And we will have special initiatives aimed just at Indigenous communities and a special initiative aimed just at girls and women in STEM. Because right now, STEM jobs in Canada, only 24% of them are held by women, and that's disgraceful. And so we need to work to bring that up, and that's what we are doing. And I will just mention, just to wrap here, that Science World's in the middle of literally reinventing itself, and it's an exciting moment for us. And it's a scary moment, too. It's daunting. We have a lot going on. And one of the things we want to do, and it actually stems from the kind of great work that Mark does here, is we want to become a convening hub, a place for dialogue, with a focus on how to innovate a thriving future. What does a thriving future look like? The thing about sustainability or thriving is that it's different in every place. because every place has its own unique culture and history and ecology and weather and everything else. So it's going to be different everywhere. So our goal is to figure out with the community what that thriving future looks like for British Columbia, and then help to co-create it. Help create this innovative education system, and then empower people to go and make it happen. So this was another piece, just to wrap up then with the things that I've learned about creativity. And next time Mark invites me to do something, I may run away, because I thought, oh yeah, sure, this is Creative Mornings. That sounds like fun. I'd love to do that. I had no clue that it would take me down all these pathways and get me thinking about stuff that I wasn't ready nor had time to really think about, but thank you. So I'm going to give you my formula that I came up with after immersing myself in this, and that is creativity. As I said, it all starts with intention, but it includes that immersion element. You have to immerse yourself in it. And many artists and scientists say that the true creativity part comes when they least expect it, when in fact they get their ego out of the way and they channel something else that allows them to be truly creative. And that last part, that last ingredient, is imagination. And the cool thing about this is that it's a cycle. That you start with the intention, you immerse yourself in the topic, and as I said, I don't care if it's science, art, whatever, and then you use your imagination to create new ideas, to literally innovate. And then those new ideas allow you to create new intentions, etc. And it all continues from there. So that, if I have a little thing for you to take away, that would be it. And I'll just wrap by saying that it's really an honor to be part of this, and I've gotten to know Mark the last year or two, and really enjoyed all the things that you're doing in this city to help bring creativity to the fore and help expose Vancouver to this suite of amazing people that are here. I love your interesting Vancouver program as well. So it's an honor and a pleasure to be here this morning, and I hope you'll keep an eye on Science World over the next few years. We are going to become more and more community-based. There'll be lots of opportunities for collaboration. We just did an opioid crisis event recently. We just held Vancouver's first environmental film festival. So we're doing a lot of innovative things. So please keep us in mind. And with that, I will wrap up. Thank you all very, very much.
My name is Winston Young. Hi, Dr. Scott. That was a great presentation. The part of your presentation that caught my eye was you want to foster creativity in youth, in children. I believe in that as well, and I want to find out, how do you intend to do that? Is it through the public education system or outside of that system, so you don't have to deal with the red tape?
So I think we need to transform education. As I said, I think that has to happen from all sides, inside and out. I think my personal role, and I think the way Science World is thinking about it, is that we too want to work within the education system with really progressive teachers that can think outside the box. And in terms of what works, we know that hands-on, experiential, place-based, project-based learning tends to be more engaging for kids. One of the challenges in education in general is that what kids learn in school has no relation to what they do outside of school. And so the whole notion of place-based learning is that you start in your local place. And the other piece is that people talk a lot about the knowledge economy. And the knowledge economy is a term that Peter Drucker came up with in the 1960s. We're not in the knowledge economy anymore. We're in an innovation economy. And we need to the education system needs to reflect that. We have huge problems to solve, and we need to innovate solutions. We need to engage kids in doing it. And there's powerful models where school kids, like elementary school kids, are innovating amazing solutions for their communities. So we need to get kids to learn design thinking, which, by the way, is just the same as really scientific thinking. And creating solutions, we're empowering them. The teachers and the students co-create the curriculum. So there's different ways of doing it. The education system is pretty intransigent, but as somebody who just recently came from the United States, we are light years ahead of where most of the United States is. It is staggering. And the new curriculum in British Columbia is really exciting and progressive.
I'm Sarah. I would like to know if you could speak a little bit more about the need for education to be transformed in order to meet the challenge of sustainability.
Okay. So I think, to my mind, sustainability is not a technological challenge, first and foremost. It's not a scientific challenge. It's a mental challenge. It's a challenge of worldview. And right now, we have a worldview that is unsustainable. And when I speak about sustainability, I'm really speaking about ecological sustainability. And ecological sustainability is about a broken relationship between humans and non-human nature. So if we're going to fix that, it isn't going to be technologically. If today somebody came up with free energy, whatever that source might be, and it had no pollutants, no nothing, and it was absolutely for free, would we be better off or worse off? And I would argue that we'd be worse off, because now we've got free energy to go and hammer the environment even more. That the solutions are going to come by shifting our worldview. And really this comes down to a Western way of looking at the world versus, in many respects, an indigenous way of looking at the world. That indigenous people see themselves as embedded within the natural world. That in any indigenous language that I've been able to do research on and look at this, there is no word for nature that does not include humans. But we see ourselves as outside and above nature. We see nature as resources rather than relatives, as objects rather than subjects. You can't have a relationship with an object. You have relationships with subjects. Indigenous peoples around the world, and I always hesitate to use that term broadly, but if you just want to speak about First Nations right here in the Lower Mainland, they too see themselves as part of the land. They see the earth as animate, and they care deeply about that earth. And that's the kind of worldview we need to shift to. And so that's only going to happen if we connect people to the places that they live, if they come to understand, care about, and act on behalf of those places. So to my mind, that's where education needs to go.
I'm going to go, oh my goodness.
Gotta
Let's
make
go over there
Mark
quickly.
work for it.
Hi, thanks for your talk. For those of us in post-secondary education who have kind of found our students at the bottom of that creativity being beaten out of them curve, what can you recommend to us to foster creativity again? Because my students have already kind of lost that chance to cycle into Science World at grade 5.
Yeah, it's a great question. And the interesting thing is, it is not what we did today with me. And I was, as a university professor, I always wanted to be a university professor. My father was a professor at UBC in psychology, and I had this dream of being a professor. And I got there right around the time that people said, you got to get away from this whole sage on the stage thing, and you got to quit just talking at students, and you need to engage them. And so that is what people really need. It's not about answers, it's about questions. We need to get away from thinking about content. Education is not about delivering content. Content is free and it's everywhere. We all carry it in our pockets now. We carry more information than the biggest library on the traditional library on the planet. It's about what you do with that content. So empowering kids to do stuff, where they're engaging in activities, hands-on, creating things, that's how you bring it back. It's that, give them activities where there is no right answer, but they have to use critical thinking and collaboration and creativity to come up with solutions. I think that's where education needs to go at all levels. That's a great question.
We're at 10 o'clock, so I'm just going to apologize now for going a couple minutes late. Is that okay? If you have to leave, please do, but I don't want to stop this. Is that cool? Can we do a few more questions?
Hi, my name's Anna, and I was wondering if you could go back and tell us a bit more about how systems evolve differently in an ice age versus greenhouse effect.
So, Anna, that's a great question. The amazing thing about ice ages is that minor differences in temperature cause ice to move dramatic distances north and south. So right where we're standing, 15,000 years ago, there was more than a mile of ice above us, which is an amazing thing to contemplate. So the ice would flow down. If all it needs is a few degrees, and we've all seen, like right now with global warming, we're trying to keep the global warming to less than 2 degrees. So it doesn't take a lot. And just a couple of degrees different to colder can cause ice to start moving in massive areas down south. And so in an ice house world, the plants and animals have to like go, whoa, ice is coming, and they move, and they do. Plants and animals both move, trees, everything, move wholesale. And then as the ice retreats, if it gets warmer, plants and animals move with them. And it turns out that causes a lot of evolution. So it changes not only the ecology, the temperature, the rainfall, everything, but it triggers, the environmental change triggers a lot of evolution. In a greenhouse world, a couple of degrees difference doesn't make that much difference. So you don't have these dramatic changes. So greenhouse worlds appear to be more stable. And evolution happens in other ways, through other means, like sea level moving in and out. And it's about breaking up populations into smaller units. And it looks like sea level is one of the major factors that does that. And it's amazing to think that in a greenhouse world, it may be too hot in the equatorial regions to support the kind of amazing diversity that we see now in equatorial regions like the Amazon. And instead, Utah, or mid-latitudes, may have been the most diverse, just because of what that means, how that goes. So you have different mechanisms that are driving evolution. Like a lot of those dinosaurs, one of the things you see, like they're weird and bizarre. One of the reasons they're so bizarre looking is that it's the sexual signals that are that the animals are using to distinguish each other, the same things we are. So if you cut the top off the head of a Triceratops or any others, these horned dinosaurs, it's hard to tell them apart. What evolved was their mating signal. So it was Darwin who came up with the notion of natural selection on the one hand, differential survival based on features that allow you to survive better than some of your kin, and sexual selection, the ability to pass mates on to the next generation. Well, in a greenhouse world, it looks like natural selection is dampened to some extent, and the mechanisms are different, but sexual selection is going rampant, so a lot of the new species that come are evolving through sexual selection. So that sexual selection is a major factor today as well, but it looks to be maybe an even more important factor back then. So this is all brand new. I'm just throwing ideas around based on the latest stuff that we're talking about. Thank you.
Am I the only one that just, I understood that? No. Seriously, like sometimes I watch science shows or I think about, I'm super fascinated by this stuff and I'm like, what are they talking about? No wonder you were on a dinosaur train. For kids. That's my mentality. Okay, who has, I see one here. Hands up, because I only gonna have time for, who's feeling really strongly about their question, or who could like let theirs go? You feel strongly about yours? And you feel, okay, 1, 2.
Hello, it's Marilyn. One of my struggles with my intent, which is to seek out truth, is that everybody says science proves, and science did, and studies show, and we all know how that's skewed. And I've heard it to prove incredible things. So how do you support, on the digital thing, how do I get through to the true science? How do I look behind when people start, I don't really want to give an example because some of them are offensive.
So you're talking about fake news?
Well, people are always are funding research sometimes that shows what they want it to show. My brother works for an organization that does that, and he has many times said science shows and come up with some horrible thing, and studies show. And so what I wanted to be is more discriminatory and know how to go behind when they say that and search out what kind of research that they do.
Yeah, you can make data say anything you want it to say, right? And so that's where science comes in, and having some knowledge of critical thinking and going to resources. So there's the top science journals in the world are one called Science and another one called Nature. But there's many really amazing sources like academies of sciences in countries like US and Canada and in Europe. If they're saying stuff, usually that means it's broadly supported, so it's not just going down a certain track. And that's what you're looking for. Trusted sources where you can say, yeah, we know that this has been through the mill. And when it comes to truth, truth is one of these things, it's emergent. And people say, well, there's no facts in science. And to some extent, that's true. If I take my coffee mug and I let go of it, I can willing to bet every dollar I have, I know what direction it's going to go, right? So we know certain things like evolution with the same degree of confidence. So we call evolution a theory, again, that's what it is, but theories, the true definition of scientific theories, are things that are deeply held, broadly tested, that have been attacked from numerous things that have withstood that test of time, and they have emerged as things which we understand as truths. So it's a matter of finding the sources online that allow you to get to that. And as I said, there are many. Science News is another one. So there's many good ones out there that are reviewing the latest science.
Hi, I'd like to know, why did you change the name of Brontosaurus to Sauropod?
Okay, I didn't change the name. So here's the deal. There's an animal that somebody found and they called it Brontosaurus. There was another animal from a different part of the body, the skeleton, somebody found, they called it Apatosaurus. Then somebody found a skeleton and they said, crap, we've got these two things and it turns out they're from the same animal. What are we going to do? Well, in science, the first name that was coined is the one that sticks. Apatosaurus was older than Brontosaurus, so Brontosaurus became Apatosaurus. Many people cried. It was like Pluto going away. It's like, oh my gosh, you can't do that. But then just a couple of years ago, another scientist went and looked at those fossils again, and he went, wait a minute, hold on here. Brontosaurus really is different than Apatosaurus, so Brontosaurus is back, baby. So, yeah.